Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Wilder Ride, our listeners' lounge, a chance for us to do something a little bit different. Rather than breaking our movies down 1 minute at a time, we are talking to guests for multiple minutes as we dive into their past and folks we think are pretty cool and have been either on the show before or folks who might be on the show in upcoming seasons. I'm Alan Sanders, your host, and joining me, as always, my co-host extraordinaire, Walt. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. What's going on with you?
Just enjoying. I think I'm in a goofy mood. I'm really super excited about the guest we've got coming up in just a little bit. He's in the green room. We sent the fluffers there. He said, I only need like 5 seconds. I'm like, well, you got 10 minutes. So we're going to have fantasy author J.W. Webb join us in just a little bit. And I think he's going to have, I think we're going to have a blast talking to him about his works and just about growing up in jolly old England, but moving over here to the States. And so he's torn between two worlds with the Atlantic Ocean in between.
Well, I mean, I can understand that when you are born and bred in a country as great as the UK, and then you have to come to an even greater country and realize what you missed when you were growing up. And of course, we've got him on video so we can see his reactions. That's right. We are number one.
He's in the green room giving us the peace sign. He just forgot a digit.
Well, the last time we had JW on was when we were doing the breakdown of Blazing Saddles, right?
We had Blazing, but I think actually the last time we had him on was we had our Halloween Spooktacular, and he was one of our guests.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, for the radio station, you came in. It was me, BK, and you. We were doing I think it was the 5th annual Halloween Spooktacular, and Jim came in and told us about some creepy places he grew up in jolly old England.
Well, the great thing about Jim is that we don't have to do any prep for today's show.
None whatsoever.
It's like dropping the puck, and it's game on. So
exactly.
We just know it's going to be a good show, and we're going to have fun when he gets on here.
That's all I have to do is say, Jim, and go.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, we're going to have a great time, and like with all of our guests, we will run out of time. There won't be enough time to cover everything, but I know he just is getting ready to draw. Well, he's completed at least a draft of his 12th novel in a fantasy series that we want to get him to talk about. That doesn't mean it's out yet. It's got to go to the editor. Who knows how many back and forths. In fact, we'll even ask about that when we get him in here. We'll talk about what it was like to start writing, what got him into it, and how he's come so far with a 12-book series now, all sort of interlinked. I think he's got one or two that might be sort of on the periphery. We'll let him help set the table for us when he gets here. But we always use this time to just kind of chat about what's been going on in the last week. And what's it been like on your end? Because did I talk about camping the last time we were on or not?
Yeah, I think y'all were just wrapping up your few days out of the campsite. And actually, hadn't a storm just blown through, I think?
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if I said it. If I didn't say it last time, I meant to. This was the worst week in the history of camping, in the entire history of us camping. And that's including the very first time we didn't even know what we were doing and had this little pop-up tent that you had to crawl in and couldn't even stand up. It was so small. This is the worst. In fact, we've even said from now on, we are crossing off the month of August. It is no longer a camping month.
No. Well, it's so blooming hot right now, too. I don't know how y'all stand it out there, other than the fact that you're kind of super high-tech camping and you probably have an air conditioner in your tent, an ice lady that comes around and ices you down when you need it.
You know, we had, this is so funny, we even had some friends of ours brought one of those little stand-up room air conditioners where you can put the little hose out the back and it just sort of just helps keep it blowing some cold air. Doesn't matter when it's pouring so hard that you're just sopping wet all the time. The humidity is nearly at 100%. Even if it feels cool, you're still sticky all the time. Twice in the week, we decided to come home and at least sleep in our own room. And then we had paid for 2 extra days. And when I looked at the long range forecast, I said, babe, it's gonna rain, literally those whole last 2 days, the only day we're going to have to pack everything up and hopefully not have to wring it all out when we get home is the day we were going to initially check out. So we lost 2 additional days of rental because we said we'd be there for 2 extra days, and they weren't going to refund us because we changed our minds. So it was just, you know what? But you need to have one of the worst weeks ever to remind you why all the other weeks we went camping were great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well,
you know what? My camping trip this week was like you fishing.
I was about to say, it is kind of like with fishing that the times I go out and almost fall in the water or lose a rod or get out and realize I forgot to put gas in the boat or one of the other stupid things I've done over the years, it makes you appreciate the other times.
All right, I want to get in. This is almost like a mini rant, but since you have been a guest at our radio station where I worked in the mornings, BK, he has his show there on Saturdays. I've got my show Saturdays, but I'm also there during the week. So you're familiar with our station.
And I've got a rant against BK too, but you go first.
Okay, so I walk in today, 5:30 in the morning, getting ready for the 6 a.m. start, and as I'm in the back, prepping my coffee to make my coffee in the little Keurig machine that we've got back there, I see this giant wheeled generator like built into its own frame and a big 10-gallon can of gas sitting on top. I'm like, well, this is a safety hazard sitting inside the break room, but okay, I'm not sure what this is all about. At about 7:50, our station engineer comes running in while I'm live on the air, like he wants to start talking to me, and I'm like, I'm on, like I'm pointing to the mic, I'm like, I'm on the air, okay? You've been a station engineer for the station since I've more than 20 years. You know what this is like. I'm on the air. You can't have a conversation with me. So he runs out. Then all of a sudden, I see him come back out of the corner of my eye, and then he runs out again. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Next thing I know, Matt, our station manager, comes in. He stands at the microphone just as I'm doing weather and traffic, and I say, all right, we're going to take a quick, and he starts waving to me, like, I guess we're not going to take our break. We're going to go over to Matt. He starts talking. He goes, hey, just want everybody to know, we're doing some electrical work here, and we're going to have to switch over to a generator, and we might lose the signal. This is at 7:55. We have only an hour of the show left. And so what I don't think makes it on the air, but it made it in the room, I said, so we're going to do this at 8 o'clock when we only had 1 hour left of the live Bartow's Morning News radio show that everyone's listening to on the first day of back to school for the city school system. He said,
that's right.
Well, we were told this is the only time they can do it. I'm like, you were told the only time they can do a power switch over is at 8 a.m. on a weekday. And he goes, well, honestly, I guess I could have thought about this more. I'm like, yeah, you think? So anyway, we went off air for about 12 minutes, and then we're on a generator, and the generator's keeping just the systems we need up and running. Thankfully, remember the last time we had the power outage I bitched about? And I said, why don't we have everything on a UPS? None of my stuff went down, but nothing in the cabinet was on a UPS, so we still weren't broadcasting, so we were off air. So what was great is as soon as the generator came back online to at least power everything while they were swapping over power from the line from the street. I guess the city was rerouting electrical conduit or something. I'm back on the air. I'm live, and all of a sudden I hear beep, 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 beep. Every UPS is beeping like all over the place. I'm like, what the hell? Ed comes and goes, oh, yeah, I don't think the UPS is like the being on generator. I'm like, are they going to do this for the next hour that I'm on air? He goes, yeah, probably. So I had to sit there and listen like I'm playing frickin' Simon, the old, that game that you used to have in the 80s where you're like, beep, beep,
yeah,
beep,
so
beep.
it's like having R2-D2 in the,
yes,
in the studio.
Without the personality. So anyway, that was my day today. So yay for planning. They couldn't have waited 1 more hour. Do this at 9 o'clock when I was done with the show.
Well, I mean, why would you want to do that? Because then you would get into the pre-programmed stuff that everybody really doesn't want. I mean, really wants to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Everywhere I've ever worked, there's always been something like that where it's like, we cannot move this. This has to happen every week at this time or every month at this time. And inevitably, somebody will come along and go, oh, yeah, we've got this at that time. And you're like, no, we can't have that. That is a immovable object that has to stay where, oh, no, we're going to do it. And it totally screws up everything. We had to do that we do a certain amount of billing every month. And we do it on the same day, recommended by the vendor company that runs that software. And this month on that day, they took it down for maintenance.
I'm like, when I hear something like, well, this is the only time they can do it. I'm like, throwing the bullshit flag on the field, 15 yards, roughing the listener. That is absolute shit. There's no way that you could not have said, as the vendor, the business, saying, I can't have you cut power to the building until 9 a.m. Are you telling me government workers, public workers, were going to be like, no, man, we show up at 8 o'clock on the dot. We got to get to work.
No, you do that at like 2 a.m.
Right. Well, technically, if I had been done any of the IT stuff, it's always overnight. But hey, it is what it is. All right, before we bring Jim, you said you had a quick rant.
No, I was just going to give BK a hard time, but BK doesn't need a hard time because he's BK, and that's bad enough. So
he has to look at himself in the mirror.
That's right.
Every day.
But the next time he's on, we need to get him to tell the story that he told the other day of getting the flat tire on his job last week or the week before.
He didn't tell me anything about getting a flat tire.
Yeah, he has a job now where he has to drive from Atlanta to somewhere in North Carolina every night. So he leaves at like 5 o'clock in the evening, drives up there, stays up there for like an hour, and turns around and comes back. And halfway back, so it's like 3 a.m, he blows a tire. And this is on a Friday night, so he had to be on the air at 10 o'clock the next morning. He got home at 9 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. So he, yeah, but we definitely want him to tell that story because it's really.
Well, he told me one Saturday he was really tired, but he didn't tell me because he blew a tire.
Yeah, and he had basically been up because he's trying to stay awake during the day as much as he can. And he had been up like 36 straight hours by the time he got to the station.
So BK likes to call his show the Escape Pod, but he's really just the Shuttle Pod.
That's right. Well, I think he said that was the first time he had actually drunk real coffee since since he was like 17. So I'm sure he was just buzzed out of his mind the whole time.
Oh yeah, he does that whole nonsense. I can only do decaf, otherwise I can't handle it. I'm like, well, like Jack Nicholson says, you just can't handle the truth. So.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. We've chatted enough. We've gotten the listeners all caught up on what's been going on with us for the last week. It is now going to be time for us to part the curtains and welcome to our stage none other than author J.W. Webb, Jim Webb, joining us here on the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. Jim, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I hope the staff was taking care of you in the green room back there while you were waiting to come on stage.
You know, Sophie is really nice. That jacket wearing, beautiful.
Of all the names you could have said, you picked my youngest daughter. That's awesome. We're gonna have to talk to that girl. Just because you're in college doesn't mean you get to do that.
Well, you know.
She is in college. Yeah. Well, Jim, it is a pleasure to have you join us. You have been often on the air with us in some capacity over the last couple of years. Did you ever think when you first bumped into my wife that you would end up being involved in both podcasts and radio shows here in Georgia?
I just started running straight away, but you know.
And that would have been a wise move, my friend. Wise.
Now, this is where Walt usually says, oh, based on your accent, you're probably from either Alabama or Mississippi. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, obviously. I'm a big Jimmy Buffett fan, you know, Margaritaville and all that. So, which, I mean, I shouldn't have to tell people. It's like I'm so tired of telling people that I'm from Alabama. And they look at me like, you know, really, are you? No, it was a joke. I'm sorry, I'm British. It's irony, sarcasm. It doesn't really work sometimes over here. A
lot of people think, can you talk with a British accent? I'm like, all you have to do is just be really hyper-ironic. Because that's all you guys do. Everybody I know from the UK, their sense of humor is all based on irony and sarcasm.
No, it isn't.
See?
No, not at all.
So,
Irony.
hey,
Wherefore art thou, irony?
we always do like to turn it over to the guests, and so we'll prod you with some questions. But let's very quickly. You are an author, and I want to get to that in just a second. But let's just quickly chat. You grew up in the UK and eventually made your way over here. So give us sort of the.
It was a long, hard swim, I was going to say.
So yeah, I was saying, give us the 5-minute tour of where you grew up and some of the things that you dealt with in your early years in the UK, and then what eventually led you to the United States.
Yeah. Wow, 5 minutes. Wow. I was born in Northern England, Yorkshire, a little place called Bawtry, Doncaster, surrounded by coal mines. My dad was a sales executive for a pipe selling company, and I used to tell people he sold pipes when I was a little boy, which was kind of cool because it was nothing to do with selling pipes, to do with selling, underground stuff. Anyway, I moved from there down to Sussex in the southeast of England, where I went to several schools because my folks kept dancing around a lot. That's why I ain't really got a proper education. And close to one of the schools, 3 miles actually, was Battle Abbey, which was the site of the Battle of Hastings, 1066. That's a while back. And we used to go there, and it was very creepy, spooky sort of place around about the Halloween theme, So I spent a lot of time in that part of England. And then I moved to the ultimate west of England, which is Cornwall, which is still seen by many Cornishers as a separate Celtic country, much as Wales is, and you could also say Scotland and Ireland to a certain degree. It has its own language, like Welsh. No one can understand it. I don't think the Cornish even understand it, to be honest. It's like Egyptian symbols. I think you just get drunk and carve something and they say, "Oh, that'd be proper Cornish, my dear." Straight away. I lived there for 12 years with my first wife, who I lost in 2012. And that was the real reason why I came over here and remarried to a girl that I had met at Georgia, a Cartersville girl that I had met way back in 1985 when I was sailing a tall ship around the south coast of Australia, like you do, and catching snakes and weird shit like that. And anyway, so I love it. I love it. It's great. And but as far as England's concerned, I miss the old country, of course. You see, there's no decent beer over here. Your beer's crap. I'm sorry, craft beer. What is that? It's not even a thing. I'm biased. Hit me, but I just have to say what it is. But and fish and chips. I miss fish and chips. But it's really nice.
They do have that here. I mean, you can find.
Yeah, no, I've had good fish and chips here. I have, to be fair, very good, and I've had good.
You and I now, granted, we have to go to specialty stores, but you and I have shared many a decent beer together.
Yes, yeah. No, of course you can get great beer here. And in fact, I really like certain kinds of it. But my point is, what you cannot get, or at least what I've never found yet. I went to some dreadful place in Atlanta, and it was meant to be a British pub, and it had like really good British beer, but it was carbonated and freezing cold, so it was just not right. I used to go in my local pub in Cornwall.
Carbonated and freezing cold.
Yeah, see, they like it room temperature.
I totally get drinking like most of the stuff because that's what you want over here. But what my point is, if you go in a British local, and you got hops growing in the beans, you got some weirdo with a dog in the corner and a roaring log fire, just throwing a little bit of atmosphere and some really bad 80s music in the background. You walk in there and you order a pint, and I don't know whomever just gets the old thing, cranks it down double slow, and it's got a little frothy inch head there, and it's a proper pint. And it's such a myth that people say, "Oh, you'll drink warm beer." We don't drink warm beer. We drink beer that is the right temperature. and
it just happens to be room temperature.
Catch frostbite, swallow it fast, but it's not insipid and warm. But it's full bodied, and it's anyway. That's me talking about beer.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. Walt and I are both consummate beer connoisseurs.
Yes, absolutely.
I think I've heard that mentioned before.
Actually, Walt's lucky because he lives next to or very close to Reformation Brewery, which is a microbrew that I think makes some really, really good beer.
Yeah, they absolutely do.
Was that the one? Is that the one I checked out? I can't remember. I went to one, which was great. Actually, loved it.
Yeah, they have two locations: one in downtown Canton, Georgia, one in downtown Woodstock, Georgia. And
I've seen it. I haven't been in it. I've seen it. I haven't been. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, and I was actually going to meet somebody there a couple weeks ago, and it was so packed you couldn't get in. So like a Thursday evening, it was packed. So yeah, they have some great beer. They're just starting to distribute it outside of the Southeast.
Oh,
so.
they've gotten big enough that you can get them in local grocery stores now. So I will make sure, Jim, we will be getting together here soon, and I'm going to bring you a sampling just to make sure to remind you of those, just to refresh your taste buds of the Reformation Brewery. So let's talk about, I think you had told us before, did you not serve in the military for a little bit over in the UK?
Yeah, I did 3 years in the Guards, which is basically Queen's Bodyguards. There's seven regiments of the Guards, and I was in the Household Cavalry, the Lifeguards in particular. And that was way back in late 70s, early 80s. I came out just before the Falklands War, so it was pretty good timing, actually. It was a silly little war we Brits were involved in. Didn't make a lot of sense at the time, but there you go. But, so
you had
it was a really good experience in many ways, and taught me a lot, and I survived.
Well, look, you had the Falklands, we had Grenada, right? So
yeah, really, similar. Yeah.
But that was the time I think you told us you used to do pub crawls with one of your mates who every third when the one time you hit that third bar, he hit one song on the jukebox and started crying.
Bright Eyes, Art Garfunkel. Paul Martin, he was a tough lad. He had a horse tattooed on his left arm, and it was standing in grass. And girls used to really make him mad because they say, "Why has your horse got slippers on?" He used to get really mad about that because they grass. He was a great bloke, But he used to. Yeah, we used to go to all these bars, and they were hopping bars that were great in the old town Hastings, Sussex, which is like old. I mean, seriously old. And a castle on the top, and these winding little labyrinthine lanes. There was about, I don't know how many pubs there is down there, 15, 16, all within a mile square. Some of them were really bad, some were really good. But probably the worst was the Crown. And it was our third pub. We always stuck to this rule. The Crown had to be our third pub. We had a great time in the Pump House. We had a great time in the Clarence. And we got to go to the Crown. I'm thinking, why? So we used to go to the Crown and have arm wrestles. And that's what we did in the Crown. There was never anyone in the Crown except this miserable old boy behind the bar who hated us anyway. And it was Friday night. We used to go in there and have arm wrestles. And Paul used to just wander off to the corner, put the jukebox on and play Bright Eyes. And he would sit there and he would just start weeping uncontrollably. And we really understood it, but we left him to it.
That story cracks me up every time you tell me. I'm just trying to imagine this strapping young, member of the Queen's Guard, and it's like, here comes Art Garfunkel's Bright Eyes. Like, Ugh.
He was a scrapper, and a ne'er-do-well, I suppose, but had a good heart. But yeah, he's a rabbit, so get me. I don't know.
Well, every time I've heard you tell that story, I've always wondered, did something horrible happen to him that song reminds him of? Or does he hate Art Garfunkel? Or why is he crying?
Well, I never thought to ask him, because we would only be in there half an hour and the movement passed and you'd be back to enjoying yourself again. But as you get older, it's one of those things that linger in your memory and you just think.
Yeah, what the devil was going on there?
What was that about? Was the beer?
What the hell's wrong with you, boy?
Yeah, and you don't want to reach out to him now and be like, hey, remember like 35 years ago when you were falling apart emotionally and I was just sitting there drinking beer?
And we were all laughing at you.
I hate that song.
Yeah, what was your problem?
I don't know. Seriously, it was the 70s, the end of the 70s. So
let's chat for a second about, because you kind of skipped over a really cool piece of your life story, and a part that I think is just really, really neat is prior to your first marriage, you had a chance, as many young men do, you saw the world, you were out, you were on a boat. How did you befriend and sort of create a relationship with somebody that would end up coming back around and end up being wife number 2 later in life? How did you meet her at the time? What was she doing? And how did you all decide to reconnect?
I believe, everything's connected. it's kind of destiny in many ways. But Mindy, codename Mindy, I call her. We were always close. We were always friends, and I really fancied her when I saw her on that ship all those years ago. But there was a lot going on, But we stayed friends, and there was another guy, John, a real good friend over in North Carolina, Charleston. He's a sailboat captain. He owns a few boats. He's even sort of crazier than I am in many ways. Great guy. But anyway, a few of us of that little group of people still are friends, and some are Brits, a few Australians, most are from over here. It was 1985, and I mean, a lot of them had been sponsored, and they got down there. Codename Mindy, I can't remember. I think she did something on the back of something local. I'm not sure. I can't remember, although I should remember. But in my case, I hadn't been long out of the army, and I worked in a pub for a couple of years just to get the money up, and I did get a couple of sponsors. And I did this selection course, which for a lot of them was really tough, but me having 3 years in the Guards, I just sort of, breezed through it, no problem. And I think that's how I got on it. And it was a fantastic opportunity. And we went down to Australia, and it was something that was going on for 4 years, funded by Prince Charles, or headed by Prince Charles, I should say, and a famous explorer called Blashford Snell, called Operation Raleigh. And I'm not sure, it might even still be going now, but our particular time on it was about 4 months in South Australia, starting off in Sydney and sailing a brigantine called Zebu. Very cool vessel, 2-masted schooner-type square rigger that sailed from out of Sydney. We were in Sydney for a while, dry docking and doing menial tasks and basically drinking a lot of tequila and or maybe some people were. Some of them were behaving. Mindy was one that was behaving. And
really?
She was, yeah.
That's what drew your attention. You're like, what's with the clean girl?
I know. But we sailed out from Sydney, and we went out to Adelaide, and then further to the edge of the Ceduna edge of the Great South Australian Bight. We went out to these funky little islands and did weird things to mini kangaroos, wallabies, and stuff. It was pretty bizarre. But it did involve digging up beer that the guys with us had buried like 3 years before, and it was really ice cold. So we actually had a very good time. And I came back, and basically things settled down. We both lived our lives, but years later, when my world turned upside down, I got back in touch. And she said, well, you want to come over here? And I said, nah, I can't stand the place. I spent a lot of time over here in the 80s. I hitchhiked, actually, 1986 from Alaska, Ketchikan, Alaska. There was boat trips involved, but mainly hitchhiked from Ketchikan, Alaska to Key West, Florida. August to November via California. So I stayed in Ventura, California for a while, and living in garages and just.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, see, this is where I feel like I thought I did a lot in my life, and then I hear this story, and I'm like, Jesus, I haven't done anything.
I was kind of nuts, really, when I look back on it. But yeah, I'd been in the Guards, so I wasn't that fazed by that sort of thing, even though it was really nuts. I think I saw the movie The Hitcher during that period.
Yeah, not a good one to watch while you're hitchhiking.
There goes a finger,
Was that Rutger Hauer and C. Thomas?
Yeah, Rutger Hauer, yeah.
The Hitcher. Oh, good movie.
It's an
80s
tense.
movie.
It's very tense.
All right, well, let's catch up then. So you decided to move here because you reconnected with codename Mindy.
Yes.
And she said, come over here. And you decided, you know what? Why not?
Coming. Yeah, I love the States. I've always loved the States. As I said, I was here. I spent well over a year over here in the 80s and then came back a few times. I love my home in Cornwall. It was a very cool place, but it wasn't the same after what had happened. So I was happy. I was happy to come over here. And plus, I've been driving trucks over there for many years, and I ended up driving milk tankers picking up from the dairies, which was a pretty interesting job because it was early mornings and you'd go down these lanes that were smaller than the trucks you were driving. And you would pick up the milk and come back and go to the creamery on top of the hill. Cheese plant, as Mindy calls it. And which I used to call Chernobyl because it basically looked the same. Yeah. It was a bloody awful place. Bloody awful place. But so I was very happy to come back.
All right. Now, somewhere along the way, you decided to try your hand at fantasy, at fiction, at writing a book. And did that start in the UK and continue here? Did that start here? When did you first decide, I'm going to be a writer?
Yeah, I didn't. I've always been afflicted by it. As a kid, I was telling stories about bunny rabbits on the landing, and my dad was looking at me like, boy's not right. I've always had that affliction, if you like. I actually started putting pen to paper, and I can't read my writing. 2001, I think it was. But through the 90s, I came up with this character called Corin, guy with a big sword. And he appeared when I stopped by. I parked my truck outside a pub as I was wont to do. I used to wander in a dark, dingy pub and sit in the corner with a very good English beer. Because the beer's better over there. And don't slap me. And I would sit in the corner and I would people watch. I love people watching still. Fascinated by people. And as I would do that, I would sit and relax. And after a long, for 13, 14-hour day, whatever. And then this character would come to me and the stories would build. I'd go back in my truck and nod off. And then I start writing little things about this character walking through a wood and stuff like that. And it kind of started off with him. And then my wife helped me and we came up with a name for the world he lived in, which was Anzu. And it was years later that someone said, actually, that's anus spelt wrong. I could have done without that moment, for honest. I really could have done without that moment, But when I think back now, I think, well, it's cryptic, man. It's cryptic. Excuse my French.
No, it's good. Anzu. It's misspelled for anus.
It was meant to be. It was meant to be. I'll see who would spot that. Anyway, I've got that out of the way. I've got that out of the way now. And it was too late to change it to Aranzu or Pump Yours or whatever. So
ironically, it was a backdoor way of spelling it.
Yes.
So beyond the joke of that, you two kind of work together, fleshing out sort of the character, the concept, and initial story. Because I know some of these stories, and I'm trying to make sure for the listener that's brand new to this podcast, that have never heard you with us before on the air, how did it suddenly evolve into at least its first complete novel? And then when did it take hold of you, realizing there was a much bigger world here that I could keep telling stories?
Well, it did evolve. As I say, it started off with this one individual, and then a few others started tagging along, and we came up with a name for this world. And I basically had a very loose plot. This guy walking out of a wood to a pub, funny enough. The whole thing sort of started with that.
Put on Art Garfunkel and cry for 3 hours.
Yeah, he walked into the pub and the minstrel was playing and he started weeping.
There were no rabbits or mentions of bright eyes in any of my books. I have to say that now. But no, it ends up the fight in the pub and it goes from there. And then it was really, I guess I wrote that introductory scene as my first chapter around about 2001. And it was, between working all those hours, it was about 2003 that we moved down to Cornwall sometime by then. And the vibe in Cornwall is very mystical, Celtic, and I think it's a good place for a writer.
Well, there's so much rich English history, everything from Shakespeare's history plays being based in there, the stories of Harry and conquest, and obviously England has a very long tradition of kings and queens and all the manipulations and machinations of, the church gets involved, government, politics. And I think you told me before that that's sort of in the back of your mind growing up there and just having that as sort of your backdrop of history kind of helped fuel some of the texture of this world.
Yeah, I think so. And we take it for granted a lot in Britain because everything is so old and, you just don't really notice it. But but part of it soaks into you. But Cornwall in particular is kind of a strange place in many ways. It absolutely, it's kind of, I tell people it's more like Ireland than England in many ways. It's got more in common. It actually breathes that Celtic vibe. You can imagine seeing, not leprechauns, but the Irish, but you can imagine seeing like Cornish knockers or something looking at you in a misty twilight. So it is very much, a lot of artists go to Cornwall. St. Ives in the west, beautiful, beautiful town. Don't go there in August. Don't go there in August. Never. It's full of artists and national take galleries there as well. So it's a place that lends itself to that. And I mean, when we were in Cornwall, I was there about 14 years. I wrote basically the first book because it evolved, and then it was huge and sprawling. And of course, I didn't even know what it was. It was my stuff not good enough then, yeah. So anyway, I split it in half and made it 2 books, and it was a long learning curve. And then when I lost Ray, my first wife, the year before, we were renting our place out by the coast. We had a lovely cottage by the coast, and we were renting that out because we were tight for cash, and we had a little mobile caravan, only 16 foot long, and we were living in that and drinking wine, and I was working up a cheese plant and coming back, and we were doing all right. And I wrote then so far my biggest book, which was called Gol, Gol, which was the prequel to the one I just written, which was back then was The Shattered Crown. I call it a prequel. People say it's not really a prequel, but anyway, it was set 1,000 years before the main series. So actually everybody in it was dead. So that gave me a clean slate to go back up to the main series and give a real prequel, if you like, to the character Corin and go into his backstory. And that became a trilogy. The trilogy, which is Grey Wolf, Legends of the Long Sword, because he has his big, very long sword, Wolves and Assassins, which were fairly small books. So they introduced him from being a young sproggit to a hard-nosed mercenary in the southern deserts. And then it goes into his main series, which starts with The Shattered Crown, which was that book, the first book I wrote. And The Lost Prince was the other half of that book because it was so big I needed to chop it up. And then I concluded that trilogy with The Grass Throne. And that is all about this one bloke, this one geezer, Corin, with a big sword. After that, I went off on a slight tangent and wrote a book called The Emerald Queen, which is going to be the start of another trilogy. And it's set 7 years after the end of The Glass Throne. So, I know this is all over the place. And
No. This is fantastic. Just keep going. You're good.
Okay. Well, there's 2 more books to follow that, which I haven't written yet, but I have drafted out. So I know where I'm going with that. But I had this sort of side idea that I wanted to go in a slight different direction, but stay with the series. So rather than going on and writing the sequel to The Emerald Queen, which I'm ready to do, which is about one of the characters in The Emerald Queen, I sidestepped and went forward 1,000 years. So Gol is 1,000 years back. We've got the main books in the middle, and now I've gone 1,000 years forward. And that's when I wrote this one, Blood Feud, which is basically draws a lot from Norse myth, Teutonic myths, and legend. I do a play on Odin and Loki, and it features 3 protagonists, 3 characters. The first one is your iconic Northman, if you like, Norseman, Viking, but I call him a Northman, J.R.R. He's an honorable, honest dude, and he's fighting as a mercenary in the Imperial Shen, which is my take on, Oriental countries. And he has a man come basically to assassinate him in Holmgang, which is their honorable way of fighting. And through that, he learns that his whole family was wiped out by this witch. And I use the term witch loosely because she's actually a sorceress, and there's a lot more to her. And she's very, very unpleasant. Probably one of the most unpleasant characters I've ever had, actually.
I think I've met her.
Yeah, I think there was one walking around in Ackworth sometime. Anyway, she's a big villain in this, and there's a string of nasty individuals connected to her. But basically, she's stolen. He comes from an island called Valkador, which features in my other books, but this is in the future. She's stolen his whole island and hidden it. He knows nothing of his past. But this geezer comes and they have a fight. And through this guy, he learns that basically he's got to take out this witch, but she's so powerful. But what happens is, inadvertently, these two other characters come along. One is a shape-shifting red-haired female who is actually, I've
met her.
You don't mess with her. She's worse than the witch. She changes to a tiger. And we don't really know how it happens, but I call her spirit an Akashi. And she's from the sort of Orient type lands, Rundali, I call it. And the other character is slightly wacky. He's a little guy. He's a thief. He's a member of one of the local gangs that got thrown out by the other gangs, and they want to cut his tribes out. And he's a chance merchant, and he latches on to Big Yara because he sees this bloke's going to look after me. He's a good guy. So he's the one that ferries J.R.R. across this island to fight this other guy. So this is how it all starts. And basically the upshot is I've just written, so this is Bloodview, book one of that trilogy, which you can read completely as an introduction to the series. You don't have to read any other books because 1,000 years later. I've just today finished the sequel to that book, which is called The Giant's Dance, which is actually bigger than that book, and I'm pretty horrified at how big it is. And I will, over the fall and winter, start working on the third in that series, and third in that trilogy, and that will be complete, say around about January, February. The one I've written now will be launched before Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Jim, the thing that's fascinating to me about all this, and I don't know how you do this, but you're basically building a universe in your mind and putting it on paper. How do you keep up with all this? How do you keep up with the characters? How do you keep up with the geography? In a way, it's almost like you're playing this gigantic Dungeons and Dragons game by yourself and having to keep up with every aspect of it. Because, fans are always going to go, now, wait a minute, this guy was left-handed, or, they're always going to pick it apart.
They absolutely do. I've been pulled on that lots of times. And I'm like, really?
Oh, well, did he do that?
What are you talking about? It just evolved, and particularly with my character Corin, who really has been around in my head since the 90s. I feel that I know him very well, and he's a truculent, obnoxious git. So I don't know where he came from. Nothing to do with me. But
don't look in the mirror.
I have in this one. Actually, I have a goblin that lives inside a mirror, kind of almost like what's her face, Snow White sort of thing. But this character comes out and leers and is really foul-mouthed at the witch and that. And he tries to advise her, and she's always slapping the mirror. It's kind of a comic little bit inside it. But so that's the mirror thing. But in answer to your question, well, I don't know. I've always been a storyteller. And I tell people that I am a storyteller. I learned to write. My writing's getting better. Much better, I think, than it was. But, I came from being a storyteller. And then I learned the hard way that, heck, you have to edit stuff. And then you have to edit stuff again. Then you have to copy edit. And you have to proof. And this stuff needs to actually be well written. But my mindset was always get the story down. And I do make notes, but I can't read my own writing, so I don't really know how. And I tried using Scrivener, but it just did my head in. It's way too complicated.
Well, I think all creative people have that part to them where, they have those moments of revelation and have to get something on paper. And I've got a couple of other friends who are writers, and I talked to somebody about writing comedy, and they're like, a lot of times I'll jot stuff down, and then 15 minutes later I look at it again and it makes no sense, and then I've kind of got to work on it, rework it. And I'm sure that there's a lot of frustration in that, but I'm sure it's got to be rewarding when you get to the end of one of your books and say, I have told this story that's been simmering in my head for 2 or 3 years, and I've come to the completion of it. There has to be a real sense of accomplishment in doing that.
it's cathartic. It's very satisfying. It's also exhausting. I find it wears me out. I sort of break my weeks up into marketing, and fortunately, I've got someone to help me with that now. But when I get on to like a lot of people do, a little bit of marketing a day, a little bit of writing in a day. They've got kids to look after. I just don't know how they do it. I just can't do that. So when I go into, I write my first draft. I don't worry about if it even reads properly. I don't worry about where to put the period, I don't worry about any of that. I get the story down. Doesn't matter. Get it down. I find that process exhausting. But it's like, oh, I got the story down. It's like it's there. But I've just gone through the second draft, and I enjoy that much more because you've already written a story, so you can go through it and think, well, that's not going to happen. Or you can, why did I kill him off? He turns up 3 pages later. That's...
Whoops. A little problematic.
Yeah.
Well, that's
you say, "Oh, I didn't really die." It was a joke.
I'm glad you said that because I've talked to other authors before, and I've dabbled, and I have nowhere near come to finishing a book, let alone a now dozen books like you have. But I've always heard, get the story down. The real act of writing takes place once it's all done on paper, because now it's fine-tuning and pruning and tweaking and then having the thick enough skin to work with somebody who's going to tell you what you wrote here sucks. You got to fix it, because it's so hard, because these are your darlings. And I've heard the phrase, you have to learn how to kill your darlings sometimes when you've written yourself into a corner. You're
so right, Alan. And I found that very hard to begin with. My book Goal, which is a fantastic story, but the editing on reflection could have been better, could have been tighter. And I got almost prima donna about that, because I thought it was the best thing since Lord of the Rings, and
I'm the next Tolkien.
But the editor was like sort of, no, actually there's a few holes in this. But so, you learn the hard way. And but for me, getting the first draft down, it's like a watercolor artist just doing the broad wash, Just get the broad wash, the background on, and then look at it for a while, and then you start to visualize what's coming next. And the stories tell themselves for me. My characters are always out of control, and I don't know what they're going to do next. I've literally gone out of one chapter, come back the next day, starting writing the next one, and someone's popped up that isn't meant to be there and just done something really bad, and I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I like that.
One of the things I can say, and I'm coming at it only from the perspective of someone who's attempted this feat but have never been successful. I can tell when I'm in the moment, when I feel like the creativity is there, when I no longer see my computer screen, when I no longer see the cursor. I feel like my hands are typing out what I'm seeing in my head, and it's almost playing out like a movie.
Jedi mind trick. Yeah, that's never happened to me because I'm a crap typer, and I would just end up sort of falling off the desk or something. But yeah, the muse, they call it, don't they? Ponzi sort of word, but that's what they call it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that from time to time.
Well, that's how I know when I've run into writer's block, when all of a sudden I'm just staring at like the screen and I see it's just freaking Microsoft Word on my computer, and it's just a bunch of letters looking at me, and they don't really make a whole lot of sense.
Well, that's when you got to go downstairs and pour yourself a
exactly.
Then it all comes.
All right, I want. We're almost out of time for our interview segment, but we're going to have you hang out with us for the rest. But I do want to get into a couple of other pieces for the audience, because you do have you mentioned, hey, I've written my perfect Lord of the Rings, and you realized in your youth and your hubris that wasn't true. But you also did something that was kind of ballsy in your youth. You actually tried to get in touch with the original illustrator from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, he ended up a good friend of mine, actually, Roger Garland. Sadly, he passed about 3 years ago. Such a nice, it was very unfortunate. He had something caught, but lovely man, superb illustrator. And yeah, he did the original covers to Tom Bombadil, Silmarillion, some of the Hobbit covers back in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, that sort of time. And he had an art studio. Actually, it would have been 80s, thinking about it. he had an art studio in Cornwall near where I lived. And I saw that actually when I was living in Sussex and driving in that part of the world. It's the first time I saw it. I thought, wow, Tolkien gallery. So I made a note of that. And then it was around about 2002. I drove up his drive. But he did have an art studio, so it wasn't like it was gate crashing or anything. And knocked on his door. And he had a lovely wife, and she, I think, lives in France now. Another fantastic artist she is too. She does a lot of Arthurian legend stuff. So they were well known and situated in Cornwall wedged between Bodmin Moor and Dartmoor, beautiful part of the world. And anyway, Roger very kindly put up with me and read my first chapter in the horrible state that it was of The Shattered Crown. And Linda afterwards said, do you know, he really loved that. And he said, that's really good. And I was like, wow. So I pushed it further and said, well, you know, would you do some? This was actually a couple of years later because I sort of went in and kept sort of seeing the studio every now and then and got to know them a bit better. Lovely people. But he said, a couple of years later, I said to him, would you consider designing an image for my book series, Anzu? Sure. You know, so he did this first image. And it went on for 2 or 3 other images. And then following up from that a bit later, actually when I was over here, and he was doing he did my first website for me, he was doing quite a lot of things, and we knew each other quite well. I asked him to do some bespoke illustrations of my characters in the series, and he did that. And I've got all those. I've got the originals, and they feature inside all the books. So that was very cool. But he was one of Tolkien's illustrators for a long time.
See, I think that's awesome. Now, I want to give you a plug for your artist that you're using now, because whether we like it or not, we always say don't judge a book by its cover, but being an avid reader, we know fantasy novels, if they don't have a really cool cover, people may just gloss over it in the library or in the bookstore and go to something else. You have a fantastic, I don't know if you call it artist or illustrator, but who does your books now? Because they are fantastic.
She is fantastic. She's American. She lives in England. So the opposite of me, if you like. Only she's bright, as I'm not. She's her name is her work name is Raven, Ravven, and I think her website is just raven.com. She is amazing. She's a technical designer. I think her background is web design. She's pretty expensive, but you know that's right and proper because she is way above par, I think. And not only that, she's a super person. She's always been very good to me. I approached her initially probably 3 or 4 years ago, and she's done so many covers for me. She's done a bunch of covers. I haven't even written the books yet because I thought these covers are so great. I'll just get the cover and write the book around the cover. And Bloodfeud actually was one of those. So yeah, she's super helpful, very nice person, and incredibly talented. Yeah. So, but you're right. That's one of the biggest misnomers out is a book isn't judged by its cover. I mean, the big thing, and I would add actually, Alan, to that, which is very important and moot for me as an independent author, because I employ people to work for me, outsourcing, but my point is, if you get in with a traditional publishing deal, which nowadays is practically impossible, you still have to market your own books. You still have to do everything, but there are certain things they do for you. Whether if you're independent, you have to do it all yourself. So the biggest thing you're up against is visibility, because when a publishing, when say Random House puts a book out, they have like 500 reviewers there already. You know, these guys are there. They're cheating, if you like. They've got a huge advantage, and that's just the way it is. Same as music, same as many other things. If you're doing it yourself, you've got to think ahead on that. And so visibility is the biggest thing you're up against, which comes with the marketing. So just like I was talking about books or you know, all the other social media, all the other ways of getting them out. That is the biggest challenge, and I think it's the biggest challenge for most people in the art world now.
Well, we find that too. I mean, we, you know, as podcasters, we want people to know about us and listen. So we do have to figure those out. And speaking of that, Jim, 2 things I want to ask you kind of as we close this segment. Could you just take a minute to tell us where we can find your works and where we can find out about you, and if anybody wants to reach out to you, how they can do that. And then also remind us which book you would start with in your series as a new reader of your work. Okay, well, you can reach me by my website, which is jwwebauthor.com, jwwebauthor.com. My Facebook page is on the website. That's James Webb 61. I'm on Twitter. I don't do much there. But basically, the website's probably the easiest place. As far as books are concerned, I would actually recommend, in many ways, starting with the one I've just written, because it's a really good read. If I say so myself, it's already getting 5 and 4 stars right away through 20-odd reviews at the moment. Or I would also start with the book Grey Wolf, which is the first of my Corin books. So if you start with that book, you've got 6 books featuring the same character, which is kind of fun. And he's a great character. You know, he's got quite a few followers. So there's options there. Or you could read Goal as a standalone, because that is entirely a standalone introduction to the series, which is the big book. But I would go with either the one I've just written or Grey Wolf. Yeah. And we can get those books on Amazon and off your website, I guess. You can see them on my website. The links are to Amazon. At the moment, again, when I was going back to independent publishing, is you have an option with Amazon. If you just use them, Kindle Unlimited, they call it. If you just use them and no one else, then you get onto these people that buy a certain amount of books every month, and it ramps up. It basically doubles what you get. So a lot of independent authors go just with Amazon. I'm trialing that at the moment. I had all the books on Barnes & Noble, Kobo for quite a long time, but then I've shifted. So as an experiment, I'm trying this for about a year. So my books at the moment, all of them are purely on Amazon. So that's where you get them. So I have an Amazon page. So the other way to find me is actually go on to Amazon and Google JW Webb books or Google Legends of Anzu books, and it will come up with my Amazon author page, which has them all there. So, now, yeah. You could get the hard copies ordered, or you can get digital to, let's say, a Kindle and get a digital e-read version of the book? Yeah, absolutely. I do both. I mean, all the books have, apart from my box sets, I've got 2 box sets, and I'm going to make a print version of one of them, but the other one's so vast, it's just not sensible to do it. So so you can get paperbacks of everyone, and ebooks, and also audio. They're all out on audio now, and I love audio. It's something that I actually listen to quite a lot now. Well, you know, so many of us between podcasts and radio, and then now audiobooks and like services like Audiology and things like that. I mean, people are in the car. Well, they used to be in the car. Hopefully, we'll be back in our cars after this whole pandemic. Let's hope. Audiobooks are great. Yeah, they are. They're fantastic. And I've been lucky that I've got this really enthusiastic Irish guy from Dublin. Andrew McDermott, his name is. And he narrates all mine. And he's got the perfect voice for that Celtic vibe, which my books do portray. And he's done a few Norse mythology books as well. So he's super excited about this one. He's just actually narrated Blood Feud for me. So I've got to wait for Amazon to clear that. And then that will be on sale as well soon. Excellent. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we want to move along to some of our other segments. And with having, such great guests in our seasons, don't worry, we'll be having you back as you have in the next iteration of your series. You're always a fantastic guest whenever I've had you on the radio with me, when you've been with us on our Halloween special, and now on our 3rd season of the Wilder Ride podcast. It's been great to have you. I told you before, we move into the last 2 segments. We talk about some weird news, and do you want to hang out and just feel free to comment as we go along? Try getting rid of me. Excellent. I might have to pop out and get another beer, but I'll be back like 2 seconds later. All right. Well, now that we're going to move into our odd news segment, we go to Walt with the first really interesting news story for the week. It's no bullshit. Well, I don't know how I've gotten on this tear, but somebody sent this to me and said, hey, I know that you have been cracking up about obituaries, check this one out.
Another obit?
Another obituary. So I guess if you want to reach out to me and send me the obituaries of your crazy ass relatives, find me on Facebook, send it to me. It may make the show.
Hey, there we go. When we have audience participation.
Absolutely. So feel free to send them. This one's a train wreck. They all seem to be. So this one comes from the Arizona Republic. And this was in Phoenix. Our good friend Randall Jacobs of Phoenix died at age 65, having lived a life that would have sent a lesser man to his grave decades earlier. And buddy,
would have sent a lesser man to his grave decades earlier.
And this was written by his nephew, so it gets more and more awesome. His friends called him RJ, but his
he can't even read the line.
His friends called him RJ, but to his family, he was Uncle Bunky, a.k.a. the Bunkster. He told his last joke, which cannot be printed here, on May 4th, 2020. Uncle Bunky burned the candle and whatever else was handy at both ends. He spoke in a gravelly voice of wisecracks, mangled metaphors, and inspired profanity that reflected the Arizona dive bars, Colorado ski slopes, and various dodgy establishments where he spent his days and nights. He was a living, breathing, hang loose sign, a swaggering hybrid of Zion Desert Rat, SoCal Hobo, and Telluride Ski Bum.
Wow. This nephew's pretty clever.
This gets more and more awesome. A prolific purveyor of bunkyisms such as Save It Clown or Zebo if he was in a mood. He would mercilessly tease his Goombat's nephew with his nicknames such as Mudflap and Style Master. Just days after his beloved cat Kitters passed away, he succumbed to the great grotto, leaving behind a vapor trail of memories and a piece of sage advice lingering in his loved one's ear. Do what Bunky say, not what Bunky do. For all his chaotic energy and hysterical charm, he was a gentle soul. A night out with Bunky could result in a court summons or a world-class hangover, but his friends and family would drop whatever they were doing to make a trip out to see him. His impish smile and irreverent sense of humor were enough to quell whatever sensibilities he offered. He did not mean any harm. That was just Bunky being Bunky. When the end drew near, he left us with a final Bunkyism. I'm ready for the dirt nap, but you can't leave the party if you can't find the door. He found the door, but the party will never be the same without him. In lieu of flowers, please pay someone's open bar tab, smoke a bowl,
smoke a bowl,
and fearlessly carve out some fresh lines through the trees on the gnarliest side of the mountain. To plant a memorial tree, go to this place called the Sympathy Store. So that was our good friend Randall Jacobs from Arizona. Randall, rest in peace.
It's no bullshit.
Awesome. That's somebody that, Jim, you need to have a character like that in your book.
He's there. He's right there. Yeah. Fantastic.
Wow. What a great obit.
That was awesome.
Well, I've got a news story here that is something that our good friend Gene Wilder, I think, would have loved, especially when he was donning the top hat and the purple coat of Mr. Willy Wonka. Don't know if you caught this. It happened just today as we're recording. Of course, we released these a couple weeks out, but as we are just now recording, this happened earlier today. A Swiss candy company has confirmed a malfunction in a factory ventilation system caused a ton of cocoa powder to suddenly rain down on the surrounding village.
Awesome.
Residents of Olten report. This is from again Switzerland. Residents of Olten reported spotting snow-like cocoa powder in the air and on the ground near the city's Lindt and Sprungli candy factory. Lindt and Sprungli confirmed Tuesday that the chocolate rain was the result of a ventilation system malfunction during the production of a line of roasted cocoa nibs fragments of crushed cocoa beans. The company said strong winds in the recent days caused the powder to spread around the surrounding area. Officials said they would cover any cleaning costs for vehicles or other property covered in the cocoa powder. The company said the powder does not pose any danger to the local environment, and the ventilation system has been repaired. So it really, truly rained down chocolate in that Swiss town.
It's no bullshit.
Yeah.
See, to me, that would be awesome because I love dark chocolate, which is not very sweet and it has that very strong in the cocoa bean flavor. I love that. So to me, I'd be just like freebasing in the front lawn. Just like, just check this out.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Cuts out the middleman.
It does, yes. Pull it all together, just put in a little bit of milk, powder it up, boom, good to go.
Well, we'll move on from Switzerland back to the U.S. and go to San Antonio, Texas, where the good folks at KSAT TV in San Antonio give us this gem. Witnesses describe bizarre carjacking attempts near Kirby, Texas. It was an eventful Monday morning for Bexar County Sheriff's deputies pursuing two suspects. Quote, my understanding is that they were involved in an attempted robbery over off Lake Bend Drive, said Bexar County Sheriff Javier Salazar. The incident caught the attention of deputies who tried to follow and arrest the subjects, but after ditching the getaway vehicle, Salazar said the perpetrator's crime spree continued when one of the men tried to carjack a man. Here's where it takes a turn for the redneck. Quote, that's my mama's truck, so I can't let them leave here with mama's truck, said the man, who didn't want to be identified after almost becoming a victim. I seen him unwrapping a gun, and he had it wrapped up in a bunch of T-shirts. So I pushed the door open a little more, and I took off running. I ran out into the middle of State Road 78. But the suspect was determined. Salazar said the suspect ran to the Evergreen Lube Shop on FM 78 and stole a car in the middle of an oil change. Evergreen Lube Shop owner Mohammed Kadar said he was down in the oil pit, had just begun to drain the oil from the 2010 Honda when he saw it rolling backwards. The oil plug was still in his hand. I was shocked, Kadar said. He, the suspect, went the back way, and I saw the police come in from the front way. I stopped the police, and I told him the suspect stole the car, and the police went back chasing after him. Salazar said it wasn't hard for the deputies to follow the oil-covered car, which was leaving behind a trail of oil. The car eventually came to a stop near Walsen Road and Interstate 35 when it had a small collision with a police car.
A small collision.
Yes. Salazar said the suspect took off on foot, leaving behind his gun, and I assume the T-shirts. After a foot chase and scuffle with two deputies, the man was shocked with a taser and arrested. It's unclear how the second suspect was apprehended, but we assume it was with less fanfare. But between the two, Salazar said the felony charges they face include attempt to commit aggravated assault, attempt to commit aggravated robbery, attempt to take a weapon from an officer, which is always a smart move, evading arrest, and trying to steal my mama's truck.
It's no bullshit.
Without putting the oil cap back in.
Yeah. I just love that. That's my mama's truck, so you can't have it.
That is too funny. Well, I have a title here that sounds like it belongs in a 70s Shaft adaptation, but it actually means what it says when I say, hey, a violent turkey that forced Oakland Park to close is still on the loose after 3 months. And when I say turkey, I mean the gobble gobble kind. According to this, we're not sure if it's a demonstration of avian genius or governmental incompetence. I want you to imagine the following scenario. A terrifying wild beast is terrorizing the residents of a city. The authorities are powerless against the rampaging monster and can only resort to blocking parts of the city from the public. Sounds like a plot to a horror movie, right? Or, if you live in Oakland, California, this has unfortunately been your reality for the last several months. The creature behind this terror? The one who has caused the entire city to cower in fear? A turkey called Gerald.
Gerald?
Seriously, Gerald.
Gerald.
He's got a name. Gerald the turkey moved into the more calm rose garden at some point early this year, said an East Bay Times reporter. It's no wonder he picked the spot, since the 8-acre garden planted in 1932 is home to about 2,500 rose bushes. Now, at first, the cohabitation between Gerald and the garden's visitors was peaceful, but things started to take a dark, dark turn as he got used to his own surroundings. Locals often mingled among people, going gobble-gobble down the parking lots, making fun of Gerald. Gerald didn't like that very much. Things changed. Gerald became a different turkey. He started getting aggressive.
Still foul.
He eventually even began attacking people as in a very foul mood. Just imagine a 25-pound ball of enraged feathers careening towards you, screeching at the top of its lungs.
I've met her.
I met her. You've met a lot of these people today in this episode. According to this, he's not being gentle when bullying people. He's injured several visitors, including children and little old ladies. The psychotic Thanksgiving-themed dinosaur reject doesn't even need a reason to come at you. Victims and witnesses have described Gerald jumping on their backs, clawing and pecking at them without any provocation. One anonymous victim described the bird as relentless.
Thanksgiving can't come quick enough for Gerald.
No kidding.
Well, let's find out. Well, you would think it's just a turkey, right? This is the bird that Ben Franklin thought should be our national symbol rather than the bald eagle. The public responded to Gerald with outrage. They've been flooding the mailbox of Oakland's Animal Control Division with complaints and demands that the city has to do something about the rampaging turkey. And so, to buy some time to come up with an action plan, the city decided the best answer was to simply close the park. Can't have Gerald attacking anyone if there's no one there to attack, right?
Sure. That sounds like a good government solution.
Doesn't that sound like a great public sector option? Well, then the officials attempted to retrain... Hold on. You gotta love this. They decided the best thing to do, rather than capture and kill the bird, is retrain him and give him a better means for a better outcome for society.
Perfect.
Turns out turkeys aren't great students. At the end of July, so they closed it in May, so all of May, all of June, and then at the end of July, Oakland finally got the green light from the state of California to trap and relocate Gerald after not having paid attention to all of the attempts to retrain him. So once he'd been caught, he was shipped to a wilderness area with plenty of turkey brethren and no people. Sounds like a turkey paradise, right? Well, Gerald got used to and liked those roses, and he has been avoiding any and all attempts to catch him. So the attempt to catch him isn't working. According to a Department of Fish and Wildlife officer, he's still in there.
Oh my God.
Turkey world.
So the park is once again closed with Gerald on the loose. He has reportedly calmed down some, but according to this reporter, his bloodthirsty reputation isn't going anywhere. The animal control officers have now resorted to running after the turkey and trying to grab him. Hopefully they'll be able to do it soon, as the ongoing crisis is starting to draw threats of vigilante justice. One resident has been making continuous death threats toward Gerald and even made a few unsuccessful attempts at poultricide. The city is not exactly condemning him. Officials have warned that if the situation continues, Gerald's relocation orders might turn into a death sentence.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
There you are, a rampaging turkey, getting the best of both government and the public.
Gerald sounds like a real butthole.
It's going to end bad for Gerald, I think. I think it is.
Yeah.
Gerald's like, I'm sick of being the victim.
Lately, I'm kind of concerned, It's not going to be good.
No, he is. He's headed down a very dark path.
Yeah, he is.
I think he's there.
A very succulent, dark meat path.
My goodness.
Turkeys, they can't really fly. I mean, it'd be much better if they could fly better. I mean, it's kind of
they can fly. I mean, they can't fly far. But
no, they can sort of like a chicken, sort of take off and glide. But
yeah,
it's kind of crap.
You can hear them, man. When they're coming, you can hear them.
a 25-pound ball of pecs coming right at you.
Yeah, they're not to be trifled with.
I think that's hysterical that they haven't been able to catch this bird for months, that they actually tried to first to rehabilitate the animal after closing off the public to the park for the sake of the bird.
I love that. That's their solution to everything. Let's rehabilitate. No, let's just take him to the homeless shelter and let them have a good dinner.
Counseling. That would be next.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Gerald, what is your view on this? It's not our fault that you can't fly more than 10 yards. Are you pissed about that? Or what is your...
Yeah, what exactly set you over the edge? Was it too many dogs in the park, too many people calling your name, or was it just getting sick and tired of people cramping your style?
How was life as an egg?
Yeah.
Did you suffer any pre-hatch trauma?
Tell us everything you remember about your mother.
He was a big bird.
Where were you in the pecking order?
Spitting feathers.
In the pecking order. Oh, come on, Walt.
I think he
Don't ruffle my feathers on this one, young man.
I think he was probably the last one out. So he had a complex to begin with.
That would make sense. The other birds just fell right in line and have made families happy at Thanksgiving. This guy is going to fight us.
You wonder if maybe that his name should have been called Caesar and he's actually the prime ape in this story?
Ooh, he could be. Planet of the turkeys.
He's teaching all the other birds, you can fight back. Join with me.
Turkey invasion. Yeah.
We're sick of being carved up. It's our turn to do the carving. Hey, I'm rooting for Gerald in this case. I want to see him continue to get the better of the public
I think
sector.
he's got a great future.
I think so too. I think they need to
A short future, but a great future.
a short future, but they should definitely do at least one season of some kind of reality show with him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it'd be more sensible and low.
Last quoted as, every bird dies, but not every bird lives.
And he is living.
Oh, he's living large.
Gerald's living the dream.
All right, that's it. Brings to an end our news segment. So we're going to get to our final segment here. We're going to break down what we're watching, what we're reading, and what we're listening to. And we always go to Walt Murray first. Walt, what's up on the movie/streaming side of things? What you watching, buddy?
Well, I had finished up a couple things last week, so now I've jumped back onto Futurama. I'm going to try to get all the way through that, but that's such an awesome show. And in season to season, it stands up. There's not much of a lag in quality and humor, so I'm enjoying that. But also, I finally was able to watch a couple of the episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks. Have you been able to see any of those shows, any of those episodes yet?
That's the animated series, right?
It is the animated series, and I guess the idea came from one of the Star Trek Next Generation episodes where they basically were in the lower decks. It's called Lower Decks, and it's basically the people who work in engineering and stuff like that really run the ship or make the ship run instead of the command staff and people like that. And I'm really enjoying it. It's a smart show, good humor. It's animated, so you got to kind of act like you're watching it for your kids to see if they can, if it's good for them to watch or whatever. But it's really, really good. I think it's going to be a great series. Some of the folks who are in it are fantastic. I heard a brief podcast with a couple of them this morning, which leads me to one of my choices this week for podcasts. But really great show. So if you get a chance, check it out. If you have Pluto TV, which is a free TV service on an app, I know it's on the iPhone platform. I assume it's on all the others. But there is a Star Trek channel that's 24 hours a day of Star Trek on Pluto TV, and that's where I've caught those episodes.
Fantastic. I want to check out that Star Trek Lower Decks. I saw a preview. I kind of how when you scan through and you see it and you can pause for a second, and if you hold it there, it'll start playing the trailer for that show, so you get a sense of if you want to watch it. And I watched it. I was like, this looks interesting, but I couldn't figure out, is it a Family Guy kind of version of Star Trek? Is it really Star Trek? I couldn't figure out where it fits in the Star Trek canon.
I think the answer is yes. I think it's a lot of different things. And I have not seen the pilot yet. I'm trying to catch the pilot before I get too many episodes under my belt.
Oh, cool. All right. Jim, what about you? Anything we're just looking at either movies or things you're streaming. Is there anything you could recommend to the audience? What are you watching or streaming right now?
Well, talking about Star Trek, I did love Picard. Watched that recently. I thought it was super. I'm a huge fan of him. I'm sort of, because I write fantasy, I've delved into some of the things that have been around, but I haven't been that crazy about them, to be honest. So I've sort of gone on a different tangent. I recently watched Ozark, which I thought was fantastic. And I like watching things about the sort of out west. Watched some of Yellowstone.
Great show. I've been watching that too.
I really like Costner. I love Hatfields and McCoys, so I think he's doing his best stuff these days. Because people give him so much grief about that Waterworld, which, you know, he's been in so many good movies. Why they give him grief about? But I also like. I don't know if you've seen the show Longmire. I really like that show.
Great show.
Yeah, really good show and good scenery in that. So stuff like that I really like. So you know, I tend to watch a lot more shows in the darker months. This time of year, I just tend to sit outside on the porch, look at the cats, and imagine the next character I'm going to kill. But I would say all of those and probably really bad music is where I'm at.
Cool. I will tell you two things. Well, first of all, I want to say about Longmire. My wife has watched them all, and she said when I'm ready to finally get around to them, she would rewatch them again. I think she's actually already watched them straight through twice and would do it again.
What the thing about Longmire, I just love the characters, and to me, it's all about the characters. I mean, it's beautifully shot, but you kind of care about the characters. It's like going back to the Star Trek Second Generation or whatever it was. When you think of Deanna Troi and some of those Picard and some of those people that were just such good characters. And to me, it doesn't really matter whether it's science fiction, fantasy, crime, current affairs, Western theme. If the characters are great, you're going to like the show.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
I agree.
And not only do you have to care about them, but you have to like them, because then why are you watching characters you don't like?
Or dislike them.
Right, but you have to like how much you dislike them. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Well, and that was one of the things with Longmire is that Longmire is a flawed character, but he is a great character that you can really relate to. And no matter what's going on with him, you're always for him.
And they're all flawed. They are. They're good characters. And he is relatable because he's like, in a way, he's flawed, but he's the calm center through the whole thing with all these crazy. Yeah. I mean, I love Lou Diamond Phillips. Lou Diamond Phillips' character Henry. Lou Diamond Phillips. That may be one of his best outings as an actor. I mean, he is so good in that. Mm-hmm. He really is.
Well, here's the cool thing about Longmire. You know, it's written and based off a series of books by Craig Johnson.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I've actually had the opportunity to interview Craig Johnson and talk to him, having never seen a single show, having never read one of his books. But one of the things he thought was cool, because he was involved with the Longmire series, obviously sort of given the title of, I think, as executive producer as sort of an homage to him.
Yes.
He has a Longmire hat. And he said, I'll walk into a gas station. This is great. So here's Craig Johnson, the guy who's created this entire world that's now this hit series. He goes into a gas station wearing a Longmire hat. People will look at him as the author, not know who the hell he is, and go, oh, you watch that show too?
That is awesome.
That's brilliant.
And he told me, he goes, it's the wildest thing. He goes, nobody knows what I look like. Nobody knows that I'm involved, that I created the character. But if I wear the hat, so many people have seen the show or at least know the name. And he goes, and honestly, I kind of like that anonymity of people talking to me honestly about what they're watching, having no idea I'm the writer behind it.
That's really
cool.
funny.
That's very cool. They have Longmire days where they basically, it's filmed in Sheridan, I think, in Miami. They basically take over the town for 2 or 3 days.
What's cool is Craig Johnson has come to the Booth Western Art Museum in Bartow County, where I live, And he's been there a couple of times because it is the biggest biggest Western art museum east of the Mississippi, and is part of a huge society of other Western museums. So he's been here as a guest author a couple of times talking about his series, which has been really neat.
Wow, that's super. I mean, it's a fantastic place anyway. No, that's.
Well, I'm in a Longmire fan group on Facebook, and every once in a while.
Well, yeah.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Well, I'll get a notice every once in a while. You've been tagged in a conversation in the Longmire group. Well, I'm always like, did I say something that somebody's responding to? Well, what I realize is somebody will say Walt Longmire, and it'll tag me as when they're saying
character's
Walt
first
did something. Yeah, Walt,
it's your alter ego. Well, it's your alter ego.
It is. But I always get a kick out of that, and I always enjoy the conversations. But that's just kind of funny.
He's actually great in the actor.
Great actor, Australian guy too. You never know.
He was one of the replicants in the Matrix movies.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Obviously not the one that was Elrond. Elrond was the other one from Elrond from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Hugh something or other. But he was the other one. He was the sidekick.
Well, here are my recommendations of what I've watched in the last week. I'm a big fan of Chris Hemsworth, not just because of the MCU series, but just I think I've watched him grow up as an actor and watch him become not just a leading man, but also be able to poke fun at himself and have a good laugh. Yeah. There was a Netflix flick that came out a couple of months ago. I finally got around to it. Extraction was fantastic. It's called Extraction. He's basically a former military officer or military individual who takes jobs for hire, and in this case, trying to get back a child who's been kidnapped by a drug lord. Basically, one drug family gets in war with another drug family, and so the cartel of one decides to kidnap the child of another, and he's brought in to extract the child before anything happens. The action sequences, the camera work, it is just so good, but it's not just all action for the sake of action. It is a really, really good story. I really enjoyed it. They took their time telling it. They had their slower moments. It was really good. So check out Extraction on Netflix.
I think I noticed the fighting scenes are really good.
There's some camera work where it's moving inside the car, outside the car, back to another car. It's just, I was just blown away. It was executive produced by the Russo brothers, the same guys who did Captain America Winter Soldier, as well as Endgame and, the Avengers Endgame Part 1 and 2. Let's just call it that.
Well, staying with that thing, did you ever see the series The Bodyguard? It was about a year ago. It was set in London. It was a guy who came back from Iraq, and there was a suicide bomber on a train. And it was the guy from Game of Thrones, the one that his mother got killed and then he got killed at the Red Wedding. Can't think of his name. Good actor, Scottish actor. That was great. It ran for about 6 episodes, but it was called The Bodyguard as opposed to Bodyguard.
Yeah, I saw the 6 episodes and I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, sort of terror space thing. I was getting on the lines of that Chris Hemsworth. I agree with you. I think he's been in some really good stuff lately.
I thought it was just a really well done flick. It wasn't directed by the Russo brothers, just produced by it. I think Anthony Russo may have been one of the writers for the script. I just thought it was a good vehicle for Chris Hemsworth to show he could do something other than Thor. He can actually take a punch. He gets hurt. He actually, by the end, he's basically beat up and bloodied, and it's like, wow, so he's vulnerable. Really, really an enjoyable flick to watch on Netflix.
I do think he's a good actor. I do think he's coming into his own now. Yeah, definitely.
The only other 2 things I'll add is I'm continuing to power my way through The Next Generation. Almost done season 4, and we are done with season 4 of Bosch, moving on to season 5. So 2 more seasons.
Oh, yeah. I started watching Bosch.
Bosch is fantastic. It has been one of my all-time favorite shows to watch. Yeah. I said this on the air the other day. It is as addictive to me as 24 was when I would go binge the old 24 series, because it would always end on a note where you go, oh my God, oh, okay, I'm going to watch one more. Oh, I'm going to watch one more. My wife and I actually one Saturday watched 8 episodes nearly back to back with just stopping to make dinner. We just were hooked into Bosch. So we're starting season 5.
I think it was on season 2 I did that, where just like one Saturday I couldn't stop watching. And whatever I was doing, I had Bosch on. So it's a fantastic show.
Yeah. I got about 3 episodes into it, and then for some reason, I mean, I loved it. It was great, but for some reason, I it slipped away. But it's definitely going to be one of the first shows I get back to. And and I've been enjoying Yellowstone as well, I must admit.
If you like Longmire as much as you have, and I know my wife is hooked into that, and I know we've had other guests talk about Yellowstone, you'll love Bosch. Just let it percolate. That first season, you're learning the characters and some of the backstory. But the way they weave elements from season 1 even through seasons 2 and 3 and 4, even though you've got like your main story, but there's threads that keep you going, and then it's so well crafted. Yeah, and I would heartily recommend it.
All right, well, the acting is really fantastic, and like you said, it is well written. I cannot recommend that show highly enough.
It is the weaving. It's the weaving back and forth where you can bring someone back, and Longmire does that with that character Chance Gilbert. You can bring someone back from like one of the early episodes, and they come back and wham, and it throws you straight back, not only into the episode that you're watching, into one way back. And I think there's a real magic to that.
Yeah,
the show that does that. It really just is has a magnetism to it.
All right. Well, what about let's take a second for anything we're reading, any books that are and sometimes we have this in our segments and sometimes we don't, because it's a lot harder to once a week to have a book suggestion. Walt, you got anything that you would recommend book wise?
I'm still plowing through the book I talked about either last week or the week before, and I'm going to draw a blank on the name of it. And it is about the history of kind of the South Georgia town where they used to do all the people were coming down from New York to go to Florida for vacation, and they would get pulled over and fined an astronomical amount of money. They would get grifted at the gas station by some crazy people playing games and, all these chance games that there's no way you can win. And the book's called Praying for Sheetrock. It's a great book. I really highly recommend it. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I have finished the book Waiting for the Punch by Mark Maron. And it's a good book, kind of gritty. You're going to find stuff you like and stuff you don't like in there. But it is a very good book. And again, that's called Waiting for the Punch by Mark Maron, the comedian and actor.
Okay, Jim, outside of your amazing body of literature in the world of Anzu or Anus, what else are you reading or would you recommend?
Well, I kind of duck and dive all over the place, but what I've been reading recently is The Real History of the SAS. I mean, having served in the British forces, I actually met some of these guys when the Iranian embassy was blown up back in 1980. I was involved in that on a very outside periphery sort of side. Interesting people, but this book talks about I'm scratching my mind to think of the actual author is, but he's a journalist. Talks about how the SAS was formed in the desert. They were the first special forces unit to really be recognized as special forces, and how they came out of the Second World War and were fighting the secret war against Rommel. They were basically they went like 300 miles into the Sahara and lived in a desert. No one knew they were there, and they designed these jeeps with long wheelbases so they could get more fuel on them, and so they would raid Rommel's air bases. But they'd come from the desert. So nobody came from the desert because no one could survive out there. And they drove through the night, these crazy amount of miles. And these were crazy guys, complete nut jobs, a lot of them. But they drove through the night, they raided the air bases, and they had sporadic success to begin with, frightful casualties. But they persevered. And really what this book particular, I mean, I've read a lot of things about the SAS because I'm very fascinated in that. But this particular book stresses how it really altered many factors in the war. That El Alamein really, turned the war. It was when you guys came across and the thing was happening in Russia. It was really the point when the Axis forces were starting to lose ground. But and there were also Americans and Canadians and Australians in the SAS that I didn't realize that had come over. And it was really interesting. And the thing about these characters and what always fascinated me is how any of them survived. They were just so tough. I mean, you heard stories of someone that just walked through the desert for 200 miles and basically had nothing on his feet, but they survived. So
That's amazing.
yeah, if I can remember the guy's name, I can't off the top of my head, but it's a very good story, very good read. Yeah.
The only thing I've got, and I've talked about it a long time ago, but I kind of went back and sort of thumbed through it, and so I'm going to use this as sort of a classic. Go back, and if you haven't had a chance to, so many of our friends, Walt, love the movie Tombstone. So a lot of people think of it as their all-time favorite Western. And Jim Dunham loaned me the book, The Making of Tombstone, the behind the scenes of the classic Western, with written by John Farkas. I heartily recommend it. It really gives a lot of the stories that that you weren't allowed to know while they brought in a director after they had the first director. The first director was the guy who wrote the screenplay, and then they realized he was doing too much of like a John Ford, very slow, very giant vistas, and they realized we want a faster, modern sort of, quicker kind of an action movie. And they brought George P. Cosmatos in to be more of the action director, but really, when it comes down to it, you really realize that this was a passion project of Kurt Russell's, and that he would spend hours off, when the day was done shooting, sitting with the director, talking about what to shoot. And in a lot of people's minds, it was a Kurt Russell movie more than a George P. Cosmatos, but they had to have someone who was listed as a director. And so even though Kurt Russell is the lead, a lot of the decision-making, a lot of the framing, a lot of the story was Kurt Russell's. And so it's a really cool behind-the-scenes telling of how that movie really did get made.
It's a brilliant.
I've got that in my list of books to read. I've already bought it on Amazon, so it's just sitting there on my Kindle waiting for me to finish what I'm reading now. But I kept wanting to say Sam Elliott, and I knew that wasn't right.
Well, he was Virgil, wasn't he? He was the older brother. Yeah,
one of his best films. Sam Elliott, everybody in that, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, the whole cast was probably at their best in that movie.
Bill Paxton is the younger brother.
Yeah,
Bill Paxton was awesome.
Did you ever see, talking about brothers, did you ever see The Long Riders, which was 1981 or 2? But there's 3 sets of brothers in that. It was so cool. It was Stacy Keach and James Keach, the Carradine brothers, David Carradine, and the guys from Spinal Tap, Nicholas Guest, was it, or whatever? And Randy and Dennis Quaid. So it was a kind of crazy movie. But that was just a random thought there, talking about the brothers thing. Amazing. That was an amazing Western. This is what I do. I go off on tangents. But
you're in a good place for that.
You are. Well, as we're beginning to wrap up and run out of time, I do want to get to what are we listening to? It could be music and or podcasts, so we can do both at the same time, or just in general podcast shout-outs to any of our friends that we like to listen to. Walt, I'll start with you.
Well, as usual, I'm listening to yet another Grateful Dead album, their live 1972 album, which is probably my favorite album at this point. But also, there's a podcast I should have mentioned weeks ago, and I keep forgetting. And every week I'm like, I've got to mention this, and I keep forgetting. But Pete Davis, who is a longtime sports guy here in Atlanta, has a podcast called Holy Crap, It's Sports. And it doesn't matter where you are in the country, this is a great podcast. Pete probably knows more about sports than any other sportscaster has ever known about, the people in it, the players. If you go sport to sport, he knows the strategies, how the game is played. Pete is really just it has an incredible mind for sports. And he is really entertaining. He'll have some guests on from time to time, but he has a great take on all the games. So I would really encourage you to check out Holy Crap, It's Sports. It's not hard to find. It's Pete Davis, Atlanta sports guy, and he is doing this on his own. The station he was with shut down. So if you're listening and enjoy it, throw him a couple of bucks too. And then one that I alluded to earlier, podcast that Scott Aukerman does called Comedy Bang Bang. And it is off-the-wall humor. It's not for everybody, but it is really, really funny. He had the cast from Lower Decks on today on the show that I was listening to. And it is it's kind of a weird format, but it's almost like the people who come on are playing themselves, and they get into these crazy conversations about stuff. But Comedy Bang Bang is definitely worth checking out. There was a show on Comedy Central or something for a while. Same title. Scott Ackerman was the kind of lead person on there. So check that out. And again, Holy Crap, It's Sports and Comedy Bang Bang.
Fantastic. What about you, Jim? What are you streaming or listening to in terms of podcasts or music?
Podcast-wise, at the moment, it's mainly work-related. There's one I use, a guy called Mark Dawson, who's one of the doyens of the self-publishing world. He's done very well for himself. And it's a very good podcast called Self-Publishing 101, and it's primarily about all the hoops you have to jump through when you do this yourself. So that's I listen to that. That's once a week. Music-wise, I am all over the place. I've always been a sort of big fan of various kinds of music, and I'm a sort of closet Kate Bush fan. She's not that big over here, but huge in Britain, and a lot of really bad sort of post-punk stuff, new wave generation, X sort of stuff, Billy Idol, sort of anything loud. I like to sit out on my screen porch with a glass of wine, listening to some really bad, loud 80s music, but also like prog rock. You mentioned Grateful Dead. I mean, hey, that's just fantastic. And things like Yes and Tangerine Dream, just out there. You know, I just want to be blasted by something. And I find I listen to that, and the sort of dogs mill around, and the cat jumps on me, and I'm so happy. So, but it morphs. It's, you know, sometimes I'll listen to something quite tranquil, or I'll listen to a bit of wailing Kate Bush screaming, or Susie and the Banshees, who I have a particular fondness for. Yeah, anything that's got some energy. You know, I just can't stand this sort of droning, whirring pop idol crap that sort of seems to have taken over things of late. But that's just me.
All right, for me, I've got several here I want to go through quickly. Walt, I tried out Stephanie Swain a couple of weeks back, suggested Literally, the Rob Lowe podcast.
Yeah.
I've listened to 4 or 5 of those episodes. Little overproduced, typical Hollywood, lots of money. And so, but as far as the guests and the conversation, have thoroughly enjoyed it. So Literally is really good. Just listen to a podcast, and I've subscribed, and I'm going back and now listening. Ryan Wabalkin, who has done some of the Sly cast with our friends from the Rocky Minute, he and his brother started a cast a while ago called The Worst of the Best, where
Yes.
they'll take an album or a movie or whatever, and they'll talk about how everyone says, well, this is the best example. Well, of that, what's the worst cut on this album if you have to pick? Because they're all great songs. What's the worst of the best of this album? And they just did one on Anthrax with guest, our good friend Doug Greenberg from the Rocky Minute. So check that one out. I really enjoyed it. And ironically, Ryan reached out to me and said, well, hey, would you like to come on and do one? So I'm going to do one with him probably in October or November on Queensryche. So that'll be a lot of fun for me.
Great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, and Ryan's such a great guy. And he's really interesting too. He's in the Canadian Navy, and but he is just a fantastic guy. So every time I listen to one of his podcasts, he makes me laugh because he's just such a good guy to know, and just, you know, he's a Canadian. He's friendly, you know, he's just a good guy. So
yeah. I had a great time chatting with him, going back and forth, and kind of working through being hopefully involved with that show in the coming months. So stay tuned. I'll let you know when I get a little more detail. In general, always a big shout out to 60 Minutes With. They're such a good podcast over in the UK. And we are working on, me and Chris Jellyman are working on, we're going to be recording next week, but we're doing our pre-production work on Ride the Lightning. We're doing a Metallica discography kind of a mini series. We did a pilot episode. We talked about Kill 'Em All, and now we're moving on to album 2. Big shout out to the Real Queens of Queens. They're on season 2. They added a 3rd voice to their season, and they continue to have a lot of fun. And the Bad Cop show, 2 guys that are so irreverent, so inappropriate, so not safe for work, and definitely not politically correct, which makes them so much fun to listen to. All right, we're at the end. Jim, before we let Walt tell everybody else how to learn more about our show, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to be with us here in our Listeners Lounge.
Well, thank you for having me, Alan and Walt. And I always love hanging out with you guys. It's always great.
We've got to make a point of getting together with a pint or 2 or 12 and do that soon.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Things are going to get back to normal.
The weather is finally starting to cool off. You know what? Maybe we should find a way to get the wives to make a point of us getting together and just sitting on that screen porch and do nothing but chat and drink beer.
It's one of my favorite places in the world. It really
There's nothing wrong with it.
What's you
Nothing
say?
wrong with it at all.
Nah.
Walt, the good folks listening might want to learn how to interact with us, maybe learn more about what we've done. So how do they do it?
Well, there are a couple of things that you can do, and I'm going to actually ask for a favor this week. The best way to find out about us is to go to our website, which is thewilderride.com. And of course, from there, you'll just clicks away from finding us on Facebook and Instagram and all the other great places. You also have a list of all of our guests and their bios as they have provided them to us, links to some of their work as it's available. You also have all of our old stuff, interviews, season 1 and season 2 of The Wilder Ride. And then as we have stuff come up, we're going to try to put more and more announcements on our website and things like that. That being said, 2 things that you can help us out with. Number 1, of course, we're always going to let you know about Patreon. If you have a few dollars you'd like to throw our way and help us out, we have production costs and equipment costs, other things like that. So anything that you can do to help us out would be great. We've got some great folks who've been with us for a long time, one of whom is going to be a guest on the show coming up. If that's something you'd be so inclined to do, we would really appreciate it. We know there's some great causes out there, but if you are so interested, go to Patreon. You'll see how to do that. Also, if you know of a good guest that you would like to have us on, have on the show, we would love to talk to those folks. So reach out to me or Alan. I will take primary responsibility for that. If people want to reach out to me and just say, hey, I know so-and-so who's in this band that everybody knows, or so-and-so who's written these great books or whatever. I can't promise that we're going to be able to have everybody because we are starting to stack up, actually probably over a month out, 2 months out now. So, but if you do have somebody who's interesting who we might want to talk to, please let us know that as well.
Absolutely. Great idea. And certainly because, you know what? We only know so many people. We can reach out to people, but if somebody out there has a relationship and goes, oh, you know what? I know somebody who knows somebody who, might be best friends and relatives, neighbors, roommates, and that makes nothing to us, but we would love to have them on the show. Send it our way. And I'll close with just remember 3 things: rate, review, share. It only takes a second to rate, takes a little bit longer to review, but it takes no time at all to share. If you like this episode, stick it in your social media, whatever podcatcher you're listening to. Click the button to share or copy link, put it out there, let everybody know, so that way we can continue to help grow the audience, because part of what we do is bring a spotlight to our guests, which means it's good for JW Webb today and good for all of our guests, for folks to either pick up the albums they've been on, the podcasts they're on, the shows they're with, the books they're writing. We just want to try to help out all of our guests as well, and the best way to do that is to continue to grow our very own audience. Jim, once again, thank you so much for being here in our Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Walt. It's been great.
All right.
Jim, it's been great. Thanks. I really appreciate you being here.
Till next week, folks, come on back. We are every Tuesday, first thing in the morning. You get a brand new episode right here, the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. Jim, thank you. You know what? I learned more today, and I've interviewed you 4 or 5 times, and I still learned something new about you.
As well.
He's like an onion. You just keep peeling him, and there's more there.
You know what they say, still waters run deep. There's some bones in the bottom of that lake, I got to tell you.
Derby Lions.
Well,
Lions.
Speaking of lake, you know what we need to do is I need to throw the boat in the water over here and head to Cartersville and pick y'all up, and maybe we can just grab a 6-pack and some food, sit on the boat, enjoy an evening and a couple of beers and
wait a minute, you said a 6-pack. What are you drinking?
Yeah.
Gummies? No, I will not be drinking. I will be a responsible boat captain and let y'all enjoy it.
You like we do. We rotate